Hello Gisberg 2000. This is a response to your proof of the non-existence of God. You made some interesting points that I'd like to expand upon. First of all, you can prove that something doesn't exist. The way you do this in mathematics is you take the definition and show that it's inconsistent with your base axioms. So a simple example of this, if you want to prove that there are an infinite number of prime numbers, you suppose that there is a largest prime number. We want to prove that the largest prime number doesn't exist. And we simply say, take the product of it and all the primes below it, then add 1. Then this number is not divisible by the earlier prime, so either it's prime, if it's prime, then it's larger than your largest prime, which is your contradiction. So, to make this a little bit more concrete, let's look at your Santa Claus example. Santa Claus the problem with proving that Santa Claus doesn't exist is there are three problems. One is that apparently Santa Claus is based on a real person named Saint Nicholas from Scandinavia from some time ago. So yeah, you could say that Santa Claus did exist. He's dead now, but no. Then of course there are two other somewhat more amusing problems. One, if you ever saw the movie Miracle on 34th Street, in which they simply conned the U.S. Postal Service into mailing a bunch of Santa Claus letters to Santa Claus to a particular person, Kris Kringle, whatever. And somewhat more serious and modern problem. If you type Santa Claus, North Pole into maps.google.com, it gives you an address in Lewisville, Texas, area code 75067, and if you zoom all the way down, the pin ends up in the center of a cul-de-sac. It's surrounded by houses, and one of these houses has got a pool. And so I can only assume that Santa Claus lives in a bunker under this cul-de-sac in Texas. Anyways, a little bit more seriously though, when we say we want to prove that Santa Claus doesn't exist, we're obviously talking about the common definition of Santa Claus, and this is crucial. We're talking about the guy in a red suit, has elves making toys, and flies around the world on December 25th in a sleigh, and delivers all these toys to all the kids. Okay, so how do we prove that Santa Claus doesn't exist? Well, we simply ask, how many toys does he make? How many toys does he have to deliver? How does he fit that in the sleigh? Since he delivers to every kid in the United States anyways, or a lot of kids anyways, how fast does he have to be going? Does this cause a problem with the FAA? Anyways, if you look around in the chimney where he's supposed to break in, you don't typically find soot around the base of the chimney. So there's no end of methods of proving that Santa Claus doesn't exist. So we want to simply carry this as by analogy to proving that God doesn't exist. So the pursuit is the same in that we need to first establish what is the definition of God. So if you have a believer that you're interrogating about this or discussing this with, you can ask them, well, what's your definition of God? And this will usually split the believer into three main categories. One is that they'll just quote the Bible or the Quran or whatever. That's the main thing you go after, and then you just slam him with one of any number of contradictions that's in the Bible. The second approach is that they'll say that there is no definition, and of course we're all very happy when they say that. We hope that they all say that there's no definition of God. That would be perfect. And the third is that they give some wishy-washy, bogus definition, and believers are not very good at thinking on their feet, it's usually pretty easy to just um, argue with them directly on whatever definition they happen to supply. So a typical definition is they say God is love, and then you just say, okay, so since God is the creator and God is love, does that mean all the wars which God allowed to happen or caused to happen, whichever way you take it, is that like saying love caused or allowed war to happen? I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? So, whatever. Believers don't have very much depth to them, so it's usually pretty easy to argue them out. So, this is a kind of important point. I mean, when I'm pursuing, if I want to pursue a believer's assertion that God exists, or that he has a problem with me asserting that he doesn't exist, or that God doesn't exist, I always say to them, oh, it's a fairly straightforward proof. I don't actually have a proof in mind when I'm saying this, but I say this. It's a fairly straightforward proof. Just supply a definition. The believer then falls into one of these three categories, and then you just, pursue at your leisure. This is a kind of important point to do. Like, you see what I'm doing here is I'm throwing it back into the believer's face, right? You don't want to get into your own mind trap here, right? Very often an atheist or agnostic will say, well, I can't really prove that God exists because he might have some manifestation that, and so on. The problem is us atheists might have a really inventive imagination for coming up with a candidate theoretical God that we can't prove, that doesn't exist, and therefore we decide we can't prove it. And it's like, no. The substance of our atheism is usually rooted in the idea that we don't believe in any possible definition that has been supplied, that could be supplied by the believers, right? The onus is on them to supply definitions of God, and then we just knock them down one by one. That's right. It's not up to us because we're not believers. Okay. This also touches upon another point that this is an argument put forth by Bertrand Russell and Richard Dawkins, which I have a little bit of a problem with. It's the teapot argument. Like, how do we know that God exists? Well, how do we know there isn't a teapot orbiting the sun? And they just simply draw that analogy. And what I would respond to that is to say, well, we know that a teapot can exist. We can make a teapot. We can specify teapot to great detail. God is not. It does not rise to that level. God, we don't even know that it's well defined before we decide it could be orbiting around the sun or something like that. The teapot's got a better chance, is what I'm saying. That some random teapot orbiting in low orbit around the sun is it's highly improbable, but it's a better chance than God existing, that's for sure. Because God, we haven't even established that he could exist. Okay, and the final point I just want to make very quickly is when you said that is God likely to exist, you asked this question. I have a problem with this because then you're putting a probability on his existence. And this is a problem. Probability usually measures the number of successes divided by the size of the universe. So you have a chicken and egg problem here. See what I'm saying? Anyways, I appreciate your videos. They're very well done, and I hope you continue them. Thanks for listening.